Okay, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me once again for another session of live stream journaling. So today is not going to be the last day, but kind of like the last day in this sort of like, I guess you can call it an introductory series. So I've been thinking about it, and just so that you know, I'm planning on doing live streaming from now on, not every weekday like I have been, but doing it Mondays and Wednesdays, and maybe tackling some other ideas and some other things in the journal. Or it just might be, hey, look, I'm working, come and journal with me. And so that'll probably be, I like this 10 a.m. Time slot, so I might stick with that. So just so you know that this is not the end, it's kind of the end of this introductory kind of 10 session period. So thank you for joining me once again. If you'd like, pop into the comments and say hi. And if you want to tell us where you're from, that's always interesting to see where people are tuning in from. So today I want to tackle something that I call embellishment. So embellishments are just simple decorations, simple things that can help elevate our pages, make them richer, make them more interesting to look at. Just they add a lot of detail, sometimes a lot of texture. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to show you several different ways to think about adding embellishment to your pages. So let me go ahead and switch it over so you can see what I am working with. So I've got my journal, of course, and I've got a lot of different pens and markers. So I pulled out some metallic pens. I had a brand new pack of Uniball gel impact pens, and so it's a gold and a silver, and it also came with a white one of the Signo, and a lot of people like the white Uniball Signo pens because they are very opaque and they work really well in mixed media work. Of course, I have some of my favorite Castell Pitt Artist pens. I've got some of my Uniball pens. Just a lot of stuff that I'm going to work with. I also have my my Inktense pencils, and so I've got several of those that I might work with today. And then I've got that handy dandy Punchinella. And so people have asked where you could get this. Somebody gave me the pieces that I have. So if you tuned in when I was doing watercolor and watercolor pencil, I use this in both of those, and I'm going to use it today. So Punchinella. I'm not really sure how you spell it, but if you go, I kind of said eBay, I think, the first time I was talking about it, but really what I meant is Etsy. So if you go to Etsy, people are selling it on there, and they sell it in packs, and you can get different sizes. So I've got some of that, and then I've got this little, it's similar to the Punchinella, but it's something that I got when I first started journaling, and it's just from one of those like scrap places that you go to that like recycle and upcycle all the weird random stuff. And so I got this one down in North Carolina, but it has these little holes in it, and I've used it a lot, so I pulled that out as well. So if you have anything like the Punchinella, feel free to use it. I'll show you some different things, but you can always do things freehand. So those are the materials that I have. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about several different ways of thinking about embellishment. So the first way that I usually think about embellishment is making things bold. So even just looking on this page, you can see how I've added some red lines, and I've made them bold. I've emboldened them. I've made them thicker. Even the words "speak your truth," I've made them thicker. So I've talked a little bit about this already in some of the other things I've done. So if I just take my pen, and I want to go back here. So when I was talking about writing in the journal, I think in the fourth session, I had just randomly picked these words out of a book, and they're just my regular handwriting. So even in last night's session, whenever I was talking about writing, I sort of talked a little bit about this, but not a lot. I can just thicken. So last night I was really kind of drawing and making the words very graphic, but here I just want to thicken the lines, make them a little bit bolder. and it's just going to make the word stand out. So I'm not drawing the shapes in so much. I'm just really just trying to make it a little bit thicker so that it stands out. And this is something that I do a lot where, you don't need to have a lot of thought to do this. So I will sit down a lot, especially in the evenings. Maybe my wife and I are watching something on Netflix or watching a movie, and I can pay attention to the movie, but yet sit there with my journal and do this, because it doesn't take a lot of conscious thought. And I also find that this is kind of a meditative thing. So if I'm sitting quietly in my studio and I'm just focusing on this, I can really get present with the art. And it's almost like the words, since I'm working on words, it's like the words start to kind of seep in, almost like osmosis. It just sort of resonate, kind of sit there and resonate, and just kind of help me focus, help me calm down. And I mentioned that a lot when I was talking about just drawing some simple lines and simple shapes in the journal as a way to kind of clear my mind, get focused. So you could see how just making these words a little bit bolder helps them stand out. And I'll just do this last word. You don't need to see me do all of the words. But you get the idea that you can find some of your writing, some of your lists, some of the words that you have, and make them a little bit bolder, so it's not just your standard thin, skinny handwriting. Just make those words stand out a little bit more. So you can really see how these three upper words stand out much more than that. So just making things bold. So I really think about embellishment. It's not something that happens at the end of a page. It happens throughout. And so that, this is a page that's really in the beginning stages, but it's nice to go and have these kind of bold words that stand out. But I can find pages where I have things that are pretty underway. So this spread has a lot going on, a lot of layers, and maybe I want to make things bolder. Let's see, all of a sudden something funny happened on my Facebook. Hold on, I don't know if I'm still streaming or not. I think it says I am. It says I'm live. Okay, sorry about that. It just seemed like all of a sudden it decided to yeah, it's something switched on my computer, so it says that I'm still live. So if somebody can leave me a comment saying that I'm still broadcasting, that would be great. According to my computer, I am, but it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, what has happened here? So anyway, sorry about that. Yeah, it says that I'm live. Oh, the wonders of technology. All right. Okay, I'm still live. You're still on. Okay, awesome. I just wanted to make sure that that's the thing. The computer can do like weird stuff. So anyway, I was talking about this page. So yeah, I got lots of layers going on, and I have a few things like the circles and maybe the lines over here. I think I'm going to go in the circles. The circles really stand out because of the contrast. So I took some of my Inktense pencils and used a leaf green and went around these circles. Really helps them stand out. But I'm going to go in with my blue Uniball pen and make the circles thicker and make them bolder. and that's going to heighten the contrast. It's really going to make them pop out more. And like I said, this is just sort of a steady thing that I can do. It's a way of focusing my mind. It's a way of just letting the thoughts kind of bubble up. So in my journal, I usually don't have a theme for a page. I mean, I don't know what this page is all about right now. I don't know what the words really are, other than the words that I glued in early on. So I find that as I'm embellishing, it's kind of like, you know, when you're doing mowing the yard or vacuuming the house, that even though you're engaged in an activity, your mind is still processing. And so it's kind of like churning things around, especially kind of in the back of your mind. And so that's what I find with this, is that as I'm working, especially if I'm not around other people, or, you know, I'm not watching TV, I find that as I do this kind of stuff, the ideas kind of flow. And it's a low level amount of activity that allows my hand to like keep moving, and it allows my mind to stay engaged with the activity. But what I find is that my thoughts start turning and churning away, and so I can really focus on the ideas that have been popping up. I mean, it's right now with all my talking, I can't do that. So doing this emboldening, this emboldened line, this bold line going around, it's enough activity where I don't have to give it 100% focus, and so I can talk. But if I wasn't talking, if I was sitting in my studio all by myself, then my mind would just be turning, and all these ideas would be kind of coming up. So so that's something to think about as I'm working, is just making my lines, my letters, things, make them bold. Okay. So another technique for adding some embellishments is this notion of outlining. So I can kind of say like this is outlining as well, because I outlined a shape with a really bold line. Sometimes I'm going to find shapes maybe that I've already done, and I want to outline them. So I can take the same blue, and maybe I don't want to make this bold, but that line just sharpens the edge of those rectangles, just makes it a little bit more distinguished. Okay, so just an easy outline. Another way to think about outlining is maybe I want to create a frame around it. So I've switched to my black. So maybe I want to come out here and just make a frame around. So I kind of think of this as outlining as well. It helps to kind of frame it off. Okay. Now I'm going to do a similar idea of this kind of framing, but I'm going to do it with some words. So if you tuned in last night, I was working on this word, awaken. And I've already outlined it once. So I did the letters in red first, and then went back with my black pen and outlined it. And so now I'm going to outline it again. I'm going to make a frame. But what I've noticed is that I tend to write my letters very close together. And so if I take my pen and I do an outline, kind of like a double outline, a thick line around. So when I get over here to this other letter, my letters are so close together that I can outline this with this kind of frame and go all the way around the whole word. And I just like that look and that feel. Oops, got a little close there. And so again, I think of this as just a slightly different way of thinking about outlining, that it doesn't have to be right on the word or the letter or the shape. And then if I have spaces inside, do those two, maybe a little one here on the A. Okay. So if I wanted to make that even stand out more, I could take something like my white gel pen and go around it. So that might be something that I do later, but that will really help that pop out. It'll make a nice bold outline around it. But I think I'll just hold off because I'm not sure if I want to do that right now. So anyway, so I got that. All right, so outlining. That's a simple, easy way to add some embellishments. Now let's think about something that I think we think about it a lot when we're talking or thinking about embellishment, and that's filling in spaces, or as little kids will say, oh, coloring. Are we going to color these in, Mr. Scott? I heard that all the time when we would do a drawing when I taught little kids. So like here, you know, so I took one of my Faber-Castell Pitt artist pens, and this has a brush tip, and I filled that in. I think I'm going to do something similar. I had a space. Here we go. So I like this space here, and I used some of that Inktense pencil around, so I outlined my shape, makes it really pop out. I did some Inktense around, that's going to help it pop out, and then I think I'm going to take this yellow pen, again it has the brush tip, and this is just going to make it a little bit more yellow. Now I must say that some of the ink and some of the paint that's down can get picked up with this, so you do have to be careful. So if you don't mind getting a little bit of color on your marker, so this yellow marker is really light, it's going to get contaminated pretty easily, especially if there's any Inktense pencil down, or if the paint will lift up a little bit, or I go over, sometimes the ink will lift up even though it's waterproof and fade proof. And I don't know if you can see, some of that blue ink has bled a little bit as I was coloring over it. But I find that the tip isn't super dirty, so it's not like the when I was using the Inktense and the yellow Crayola marker back in the second video. So just that little bit of yellow makes that really pop out. So filling in, coloring things in. So if I wanted to, I could flip through and find spaces, whether they're rectangles, maybe I want to use the yellow here. Maybe I have these little red spots over here. And so maybe I'm going to just go in and, I want them to be a little bit bolder just to fill them in. Okay. So just finding, maybe I fill in these rectangles. So that's just something to think about, is how you're filling in. So I could even go to something like here. So I did this last night, I am becoming, and it might be very difficult to read right now because it doesn't really pop out. So I could take my pen or take one of those markers and color it in, and that's going to help it make it stand out. I might make the letters bold. But the one thing is, like you can see over here, I've done some of that filling with this pen. But I think what I want to do now is I want to do something that I call surrounding. Actually, before I do that, there's one more thing. So I'll come back to this. I just remembered there's one more way to fill in that where you don't fill in the whole thing. So I want to go back. Where was that? Here we go. So a little bit earlier today, I stenciled in the word uncover. And that's a word that's been coming up a lot in some of my writing that I've been doing. So I'm going to take, this is called magenta. So it's not a real bright pink magenta, but it has a nice thin tip. And I'm going to fill this in, but instead of coloring the whole thing in, I'm going to draw a shape and make it look like it has a white outline. And then just like I've done before, I don't need to color this in really carefully and neatly and fill up all the little spaces. But I'm just adding a bit of color to these letters, and that's why I have the real thin pen. So this is another one of my favorite techniques for doing, whether it's hand-drawn letters or stenciled letters, just to fill in part of this and leave that kind of white outline around the outside of the shape. It just adds a little bit more interest than just coloring it in solidly. So if it was all solid, that would work. But I just kind of think this takes it up a notch. It's a step up above just coloring it in, of just filling it in. So you could fill something in with a solid color, you could fill something in with a pattern. There are all kinds of different ways that you can fill in a shape or a space or a letter. So you could really do lots of different things. I could have done stripes in here if I wanted to. I could have done polka dots. So anyway, just another way to kind of think about how you're filling it in. Okay, so let me go back to this page. The reason I want to go back here is that I want to talk about surrounding. So I always think about fills and surround. So filling in spaces or surrounding spaces. So I am doesn't really stand out that well. So if I take my my watercolor pencil, or in this case my Inktense pencil, I'm just going to go around my letter. And so this is very similar to what I did if you tuned into the second session where I was using watercolor pencil, well, technically my Inktense. So if you didn't see that video, or if you're not familiar with Inktense pencils, so Derwent, the company Derwent, makes these Inktense pencils. They're not technically watercolor pencils, they're water-soluble ink pencils. And I really like them because they're very transparent. And so I can draw with them, and they act just like watercolor pencils. And watercolor pencils have always been some of my favorite materials to use, but I really like the Inktense pencils because they are they're more transparent. So not showing up too well on that newspaper, or that what is that? That's a book page, I think. Okay, so I'm not going to do every letter right now. I'm not going to do the whole word, but I did I am. And then I want to take a thin, small brush. I forgot to get it out. Should be in here. Or last, nope, it's over here. Alright, so I got my water. So I can take a thin brush, it's a thin round brush, and just paint around it. And I like how the water really just makes that Inktense pencil much brighter, really activates it. And I'm just spreading it out into the background. And so, like I said, I did this in the second session on watercolor pencil, and I did it with shapes, just plain like circles and rectangles. And it's a great way to sort of make a window effect, but in this case it makes a real shadowy effect. So if you've ever played around with Photoshop or other photo editing software, and if you use words and things like that, you can add a shadow to kind of help make it pop out, and they're all kind of different things. You could have a very directed shadow, or you could have one that just sort of spreads out from underneath like I'm doing here. So that's kind of what I'm doing, is like creating this shadowy effect and spread it out. So I'll do the same thing on the word becoming, and then to make it even stand out further, maybe I'll take that white gel pen and go in and color in and fill in the letters, really make them pop out. Or maybe I'll take a darker Inktense pencil later and go around and try to make it darker around it, make it pop out more. So that's another way I kind of think about surrounding something, is with the watercolor pencil. But I can go back to my pens. So if I go back, let's see, let me flip it around. So if I want to surround, actually I'll go here. I don't know if you can really see, I used some spirals that go around this shape, and I've used some hatching around the phrase in the process, and that makes that pop out. So I can do that. I can surround something, and it doesn't have to be words. It can be shapes. I'm just trying to find, oh, there we go. So if I wanted to here, let's go back to my circles. If I really want to heighten this up, I can maybe use some spirals or circles or other shapes. And that I'm kind of packing them in, having them touch. And this kind of ties in with another technique that I like, is just using simple patterns. So I'm just repeating the spirals around, so I'm creating a pattern, but I'm doing it in a way that surrounds a space, surrounds a shape. And with the spirals, what I normally do is I go until the end of the spiral touches something else. So, oh, it touched, I stop. And so that way I can draw them so that they touch right up against each other. Okay, so just kind of surrounding some spaces. And again, this is just a kind of a mindless or a low consciousness activity, maybe is a better way of saying it, because I might not be focused and really concentrating on, oh, let me draw this spiral here and this spiral there. It becomes a very automatic activity, but my mind, it kind of frees my mind up to think and to wonder and to ponder. Okay. So again, surrounding. So surrounding, I mentioned patterns. Just flipping through, there's all kind of patterns. So here I've used some stripes on the edge, so maybe I'll do a couple more. Just kind of helps fill in the space, helps break up the space as well, add some texture. Here's some more spirals there. There's some little stripes over here if you can see them. So I do that a lot. So maybe I want to take my black pen And a lot of times it's, like with here, this packing tape transfer, I can't really do anything on top. So there's this weird little awkward space here. So maybe I want to just take and create those stripes. So any kind of pattern, stripes, spirals that repeat, circles, rectangles. And so I'll sit down and I'll just flip through and just sort of look for spaces where, oh, I want to put some stripes there, or oh, I want to put some circles there, or some dots. Those are all things to kind of think about as you're doing this. Okay. And then you may have been wondering, okay, how about the punchinella? How about the circle stuff? Well, that kind of ties into this notion of patterns, but also just random shapes. So if I have the punchinella, maybe I'll come over here with my blue pen, and maybe I want to do a row of circles. And so I can use it to create a pattern to use it as a stencil. So it's just, I could do that. Yeah, another thing I could do, let me grab the smaller one. Maybe I'll find a space. I'm going to use my pink pen. So on here, this is kind of interesting because I used this piece of punchinella on it already. And so by repeating it, and I used it again, I think I was the one, yep, use it again over here with some of the purple. Actually, so maybe I want to do some of the bigger one. So I can take the bigger one now and take my pink pen, but this time instead of doing a straight stripe, I'm just going to do random ones. So sometimes people are like, oh, I'm going to do every single circle. More power to you. To me, that's very tedious, and it's not something I'm really interested in, but I really like doing it randomly. So if you've been tuning in, you may have been hearing that word random a lot. It's something that I do just because I think when we do it randomly, I'm not attached to it. It's just sort of like, oh, I'm just doing this to get something down, to get something started. I'm just creating a texture. I'm not trying to like make everything that I'm doing super intentional or super meaningful. But what I find is that the meaning comes out, that the meaning develops on its own. And I don't even know if you can see that because it's pink on pink basically. But it just this random pattern in the back of the circles. So that's something to kind of think about as well. And the last thing I want to kind of show you or talk about are the metallics. So a lot of people love using metallics in the journal because they pop out, they really stand out. And so here I have on the side, I don't know if you could really see it, I have some silver, and I'm kind of moving it around hoping it'll catch the light so you can see that it's metallic. I did that with metallic Sharpie. So Sharpie makes metallic pens, markers. They work great, they're inexpensive. The gel pens, you can usually find a lot of those. Here I used the gold Uniball Impact gel pen, and again I'm just trying to move it around so maybe you can see it. The problem with metallics is that if you use them, maybe on here I'm going to have some metallic silver. So if I take my pen and start drawing little dots, up here where it's in the white, it might be easy to see, and then depending on the way the light's hitting it, maybe they're all showing up really well in the video, or maybe it's really hard to see them. But what I find is that with the metallics, especially the gold and the silver, depending on the background, they're going to show up well or not. So metallics really show up well on a dark background where there's a lot of contrast, and not so well on a background that's about the same value as the ink. So what I do anytime I use metallics, doesn't matter where they are unless it's on a very dark background, I just take a black pen usually and outline it. And the contrast between the black ink and the metallic ink just makes it pop out. And I like having that contrast. Now, like I said, if it's a very dark background, then maybe I skip this part. So hopefully you can see that, and it's like kind of a little bit shiny. So let's go back here to some writing I did. So this was some writing that I had done several weeks ago, and I used a silver metallic Sharpie, and instead of just outlining it, I drew a rectangle around the words, and that really helps it pop out. So again, if you're using metallics, think about how it's contrasting your the page, what's underneath there. So anyway, that's just a little bit about maybe doing some embellishments. So I hope you got something out of it. It's just a way to add a lot of depth and richness to pages, but it doesn't have to be like super meaningful or super like thoughtful. And I just always think about those embellishments as those like little touches. And oftentimes it's like when I'm getting near the end of when I'm feeling that a page is getting resolved. I don't like that word complete, because I don't think a journal page like art is ever really completed. It's just, it stops and it gets resolved, or maybe it doesn't get resolved. So in my journals, I often have pages that aren't very far along in the process. There's lots of empty space, but that's the nice thing about a journal. Not every page has to be a work of art, and I think that's one of the differences between a visual journal and an art journal. A lot of times people talk about an art journal, and they're really talking about like something that they're finishing, something that they are having finished pages in it. So but anyway, that kind of wraps up for today's episode. If you have questions, please make sure that you pop them into the comments. And if you've been making pages, if you've been working along and kind of doing your own thing, I'd love to see it. Other people would love to see it. So share that here in the comments, or if you're not a member of the Journal Fodder Junkies online workshop group here on Facebook, I run that. So you just have to click. So if you go to the Eric Scott Art Studio Facebook page where this video is, then you can join that, and you can post stuff in there. It's private, so only the members can kind of see it. Or you could just tag, you could tag me personally, or you could tag Eric Scott Art Studio, but you can kind of show and share. So share your work that way. Would love to see it. Also share the videos. So if you've been getting something out of them, I ask you, click that share button. So once this video is done, and actually you might be able to share it now that it's live, but share it, let other people know. I mean, I appreciate anybody that can kind of help spread the word. I think what I do is kind of basic as far as visual journaling, but when you put it together, it creates this very unique, very rich experience in the journal. So try to share, tag me, tag other people. If you're leave a comment and tag a friend if you want them to see the video. And then the last thing is that if you can offer any kind of support. I know this is a rough time for everyone with everything that's going on, but if you go to my website, I'll put a link in the comments. But I've got a place over there where you can offer any kind of support. I mean, any kind of support is definitely appreciated. I love the fact that you're showing up here and you're watching and leaving comments and providing feedback. But if you are able to, if you're in a position where you can offer a little bit of support, a lot of artists, a lot of freelancers, a lot of independent contractors are having a real rough time in this crisis. So anything that you can, that'd be great. So I know a lot of people have been commenting, so let me see if I can pull this up where I might be able to answer some questions. I know some people had some questions. All right, for some reason I can't see all the comments. Usually I can scroll down through them. Anyway, so the one question I see is about the gel pen, the white gel pen. Yeah, that is a Uniball Signo pen, and that tends to be a lot of people's favorites because it's very opaque. It draws very nicely on top of lots of different surfaces. The only problem with it is that, like a lot of gel pens, it gets clogged up. So if you don't use it for a long time, it kind of dries up. If you use it on top of wet glue or wet paint, that glue gets inside of the little ball inside there and really gums it up, kind of messes it up. So, but anyway, so I'll look through the comments and I'll answer questions as they come up. But thank you so much for tuning in again today. If this is your first time, go check out the other videos. They're there on the Facebook page, and I've been slowly popping them into YouTube, where you can go over there and watch them. So thanks so much, and I really appreciate it. So have an awesome day, have an awesome week, and my next live stream will be next Monday morning. So Mondays and Wednesdays from now on. All right, so thank you.